What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Door. I wish I knew what number episode we were on.
I don't know. I forgot.
Been rolling for a while now. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in. I just want to start this episode by saying we had to take a little hiatus from recording episodes of the podcast just because sometimes life happens and beautiful things and not so beautiful things and struggles and victories. And so we're glad to be back at it, and we're glad for everybody who's listening in and excited to, get these conversations continuing and hopefully affecting people's lives in a positive way. And been really appreciating all the feedback we've been getting over the last year for the podcast. And again, just excited to be back. So thank you for everybody who's tuning in. Thank you for listening. If you've supported us, if you're continuing to support us, we're back in action and ready to talk about topics that matter. And so I'm Brandon Brown here with the co-host of the podcast, my good friend Jeremy Hiltz. And we're going to talk about something that's super important today. This idea of narratives that follow you out of prison and narratives that we assign to people and some of the stigmas and some of the harmful things that is really hard to shake off post-incarceration, whether you've been home for a day or you've been home for 20 years. Some of these things really stick with you, but even more importantly, they stick in society. And, we've been talking to a lot of people recently about their experience in reentry and, some of the things that are really hard to shake off. And I think we've probably both experienced it. I know I've experienced it a lot of times, and a lot of people in the community have. But essentially, it's really hard, especially as a person who serves time in prison or serves multiple sentences in prison, to come home, and no matter how much you change and no matter how much you prove yourself, to have people feel like there's a part of your story or a part of your personality or a part of your, the way that you are in the world that you just really can't shake off. And it's something that you have to be almost hyper aware of, but sometimes it can feel super hopeless too. Like, I'll never get rid of this stigma of being a prisoner. And for me, being somebody who committed a violent crime and served a significant prison sentence, I always have to be aware of that picture of me being like a violent person and how I react in every situation. And so I know it's something that's become really important to you as well, Jeremy, with a lot of people you work with and, things that we've been through since we've known each other. So, what's on your mind thinking about the stories that kind of follow you after incarceration, no matter how long you've been home?
Well, I think, first of all, it's grateful to be back, talking about some of this stuff. Some people have reached out to me and asked, like, what, it was important to them, and I really appreciate that. It really motivated me to get back to it, and thinking about this, I over the last year or so, it's up until then, this is what you're talking about. Really, I feel like in my life I've been able to use my background to my advantage in a lot of ways, right? And I've been aware of it, and I've actually been fortunate enough to be in a position where I've been able to be an advocate. You know what I mean, and be able to be somebody that can be a voice for that, right? So I'm definitely aware of it, and it has impacted me in a lot of ways. But like, it hasn't been until more recently that it's been a personal. You know what I mean? I haven't felt it personally until much recently. So part of the reason I've been away, we haven't been doing it for me personally, is the life has gotten in the way, and I recently I got divorced. I went through a lot of things, and it's been a challenging road, just separating and ending relationships and stuff like that, right? And so that's really kind of I've been, trying to deal with some of that stuff. And during the process, there's been legal involvement. There's been a lot of different things that have come up for me in the process, right? And it has felt like during the process that there's been narratives that have played out, or that I've seen, people have said about me, and about like the situations that have gone on that have been really hurtful, to be quite honest, right? And I started thinking about like how, narratives that aren't true gain so much momentum, right? And it's because if something is said and no one believes it, it's one thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's when people start actually believing what they hear, right? Then it becomes a larger issue, right? Yeah. So if one person says it and it grows to 10, 20, 30, right? It grows into a different thing, right? It makes me like say, why would somebody actually believe this, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, there's a lot of things where I remove my own emotion from it that I can understand, right? Because I'm a big guy. I'm actually pretty passionate in a lot of ways. So sometimes the way I talk can be aggressive. So I maybe you know what I mean. Like people, I can see how it can make people feel uncomfortable. I should say, right?
Well, because people misplace the passion for aggression, right? People misplace.
Right. Well, and that's something that I've always been aware of. Yeah. You know what I mean? As being a bigger guy, like I am. I need to be aware of how like my behavior impacts other people, right? And I'm good with that, right? But I also know that like I do come from prison, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I also understand that the way that my brain works sometimes is that like I will go to this black and white place. It's either this or that. You know what I mean? I think that's been put into me from I think carceral. Because the rules in the prison setting, right, are different than the rules in the society, right? And so sometimes I have to be aware of like how my reactions are. Where is this reaction coming from? Is it coming from the system, or is it coming from a place of like a healthy place, Yeah. And that's something that I've always been aware of, right? Is like how I'm going to react to things, and because of that, right? Because I don't want to give that people, to feel uncomfortable. But with that being said, I also understand that I have come from prison. I do. I am a big white dude that has tattoos, right? But I also know that I've been successful, right? Yeah. So like recently, I was in a situation with an organization, and I felt like I was handling appropriately. I felt like I was using assertive communication and stuff, and I was met with, they said I was a white cis male, and and I didn't necessarily understand that. It actually hurt me a lot, right? It hurt me, and that's like where it starts, right? And it's like I can look at myself and I do check all those boxes right there on paper. I do. You know what I mean? I know that. I look at it. I am white. I do have tattoos on me. I have been in prison. I do have a business, and I am a man that runs a business. You know what I'm saying? And I am, right? Like these things are true about me, right? But that's because you believe that my heart is in that same place. You know what I mean?
So the implications of and that's kind of the issue, right?
And I don't want to complain. I just want to say this. I am not like disadvantaged. I believe I'm grateful for being who I am. I'm grateful for the position that I'm in. I'm grateful for the success that I've had, right? Because I've had good mentors. I've had good male and female mentors. I respect, but you know what I'm saying? I respect that. You know what I mean? And I understand that, right? And for a long time, I've been able to like just like I accept it for what it is. You know what I'm saying? People have been saying things about things. You know what I mean? Like, oh, just because of the position that I've been able to put myself in, people are going to say that. I get that part of it, right? But then it's like the belief that my character is such. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's different than saying, oh yeah, Jeremy's. I just seen Jeremy over here, right? Somebody that, you know what I mean? Because I've been in a position where I've discharged people from treatment. You know, I have houses. Sometimes we have to ask people to leave, like all this stuff. So I understand that type of thing, right? But it's the character that people believe about me. You know what I mean? And so here it is, right? And so what that does to me, when I feel like my character is being, like I feel that, I also, I'm healing up from trauma and stuff myself. So that puts me in a place where I go, no one wants me around. That's what my brain starts telling me. No one wants me around because they believe this about me, right? So a part of me is like, I am already insecure in a lot of ways, right? So when I see something about myself on social media that's hateful, it hits that. You know what I mean? It fucking attacks. That's the first thing that comes up is like, oh, it's actually fucking true.
Yeah.
What I'm saying about myself is actually true. People, you know what I mean? That's the stuff that you know what I mean? You got to fight through. You know what I'm saying? And I know that I'm not the only one that feels that way about things, right? And that's why I think it's important. Not the situations that I've been going through and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, man, I know who I am, right? I know at the end of the day who I am, and I'm not one that's typically going to be the guy that's going to go hide in the corner because I'm not feeling well. You know what I mean? I usually am able to fight through that. You know what I mean?
But you're a human being also.
Right.
The thing is, like, a lot of times we've spent so much time doing the healing, and we've spent so much time, looking in the mirror and really figuring out the things like, okay, I know who I am, even when I know these narratives and stigmas follow me, but I know that I'm not them. Right. And I do all this work to overcome the stigma and to overcome the harmful narratives about people like me. Like you said, I'm 6'5", I'm 220 pounds, I got tattoos, and I did 13 years in prison for a violent crime. So I know that when people look at me, they have assumptions when they know that part of my background. But what you're saying is so important for everybody who's listening, and hopefully people who aren't listening right now but find this down the road, is like, it's really hard to overcome the negative expectations and beliefs people have about you because of the things you can't change. And it's like, no matter how much you do change, no matter how much compassion you bring to a conversation, no matter how much history and consistency you have of being a certain way that's good, as soon as something happens that people question, even if they have no idea what the actual circumstances are, as soon as they question that one piece of your story that's like, oh, well, he did go to prison and he is a big white guy or a big black guy or a big Hispanic guy or a tiny little woman or a large woman, whatever those parts of the narrative are, people start to assign your reactions to those narratives. And so, like, there's situations that I've been in that I really, when we started talking about this before we were recording, I think about all these situations that I've been in that are so similar, and situations that I've talked to hundreds of guys and women who come out of prison that they've been in, where it's like, dude, I try so hard to let people know, like, man, who I was when I'm 21 and who I was in prison is not who I am today. And I treat, 99% of my situations with compassion and empathy and understanding. But every once in a while, somebody does something to me and I have a negative reaction to it. And my reaction is not because I'm a 6'5" white heterosexual male who's been to prison. My reaction is because you hurt me. And my voice elevates and my body tenses up. But then I see that the reaction I get from that isn't like, oh, I'm sorry for hurting you. It's, oh, here goes Brandon again, right? Here goes all the prisoners coming out of him. And so it's like, what I hear you saying and being so close to you and seeing some of the situations you've gone through and thinking about some of the situations I've gone through, like, I've been in friendships and relationships and had family issues and met random people on the street in a conversation who have, like, done really hurtful things to me, and I'm not even allowed to have an emotional reaction to it. Because as soon as I do, it's like everybody's like, takes a step back. I'm like, oh, what's the unpredictable felon gonna do now? And it's like, no, like, I've proven for a very long time that I am this person, and these good qualities that you've seen and these good qualities that people have, gravitated towards me for are my actual qualities, but I'm still a human. And so if I have a negative reaction to something, it might be not because I'm this monster. It might be because somebody treated me very badly. Or if I end up staying in my house, like you're saying, because I've had this happen to me recently too, where I know that people are talking and I know that people are judging and I know that people are assuming about what role I played in situations that I'm in, and I do become hopeless and I stay in my house for a month. And what it does is those narratives that are at play that we're talking about feed everybody's assumption of like, oh, he's not showing his face because he's wrong, or he's not showing his face because it's true. It's like, no, I'm not showing my face because I'm hurt. And I don't know how to show my face because I'm worried that if I do, everybody's just going to believe that I'm this negative story that was attached to me. That's not actually founded in the reality of any of the situations that I'm in.
Well, that's what we're really sort of talking about, is like, how do we actually cope with feeling hurt, right? Like, how do you, because like you get like, you know, you do a bunch of time and you get like, you get hurt in prison. We don't go have conversations about that, right? There's like, it stifles that process for us and teaches us something else. So it's been a long time since I was been incarcerated, but what comes up is like, how do you deal with the hurt? You know what I mean? Like, that's really where the work is like, okay, because at the end of the day, it's like, it doesn't matter if what somebody believes really about me at the end of the day, right? Because I know who I am.
Yeah.
I know when I receive this message that like, this is not who I am, that I can, you know, just get rid of it, right? But like, there's something in there that I believe about it that hurts me. You know what I'm saying? That's really the issue, right? Is there something in there? It's really because I've really, you know, I've had to, like, because of the amount of work that I've done to get into this field, because I've really had to, you know, just to get licensed, I had to go to a hearing, and it was a big deal, right? Like, and then, you know, and then like to be able to work my way into the community, right? The organization into the community has been, it's been a lot of work, man. It's been all about relationships and stuff like that. So when what's hurtful about that is I've been fighting a lot of it. I guess not fighting, but like I've been working hard at it.
Yeah.
Because it's important to me, you know what I'm saying? It's like very important to me to have a good reputation. It's very important to me to be a good man. It's be a good community member, right? To be a good leader in the community, right? And part of why it's so important to me is because sometimes I don't believe that it's true. I got to keep fighting. You know what I'm saying?
And when the frequency increases, that's when it really starts to chill away.
Right, and then you hear a different message about that, and then so that's what makes it almost like, oh shit, like this is like what I'm so fearful of.
Yeah.
In my work is like actually being said. You know what I'm saying?
Because especially when you're in a public facing or in an interactive role in your life where you're dealing with a lot of people and you're interfacing with a lot of people, it matters because as you become aware that like, man, if one person sent me this text message and it was just a personal opinion they had, I'd brush that off really easily. But when 10 people send me a message that these other 10 people over here are saying this and posting this, and we live in this social media world where anybody can make their opinions known, whether they're factual, based in any type of truth or reality, or it's just an assumption or a feeling.
And it really becomes like, who believes what's coming next? You know, right? Like, because that's like you look at politics. It's like you look at whatever it is. It's like who believes it the most. That's what's going to gain the most traction.
And as more and more, as you start to even feel like, even when it's not happening, and especially when you know that it is, when you start to feel like people are jumping on that bandwagon, right? That bandwagon of the negative narrative that's attached to you that really doesn't reflect who you are as a person at all, or even how you interact with people. But as you start to feel that the bandwagon is growing, that's when it becomes really hard to even face people that don't believe it, because you get in your mind wondering like, who's the next person that's going to believe this negative story about?
You start becoming distrustful.
Yeah, and you
everybody,
and you start wanting to retreat.
Oh, who's next? Who's coming? Who's next? I mean,
and that's tough. And it's it's the more that we were talking about this, like the more that I started realizing that this is like a really big issue in a lot of ways. Like in any dynamic in your life, whether it's in an intimate relationship or a friendship or your family dynamic or in your work setting or in your professional setting, like. It's like a really shitty reality to know that you face a different standard than whatever normal everyday people who haven't experienced like incarceration especially face. And I was thinking about this, driving today, that like if somebody's been out of prison for 10 years and they've never had any type, like they've never had any type of aggression, they've really done the work to heal from the trauma they went through of incarceration, and they've got a good community around them, and they get a job at McDonald's, right? And you know, they're working at McDonald's for a year, they've been a great employee, and then, you know, a year in, another employee comes who's somebody that just antagonizes them, constantly antagonizes them, you know, chips away at their resolve to the point that, like, finally one day that person just erupts a little bit and says something that seems aggressive, that what's the first thing people are going to think is, oh man, like, you're not safe. Because I know your background, right? I know I know you went. Well, I know this.
I also know that my reactions to things change when I'm fearful and distrustful.
For sure.
Like that. So when things come up, like I do, that's where I have the tendency to get over emotional and make mistakes in the way I carry myself, and that's across the board. You know what I mean? You feel yourself getting irritable and like things like that because it's like. And so, like, to be able to recognize it for what it is has been super helpful for me, right? Because I know really what I'm dealing with is like this fear and insecurity that is not necessarily real. It's not real, right? What I gotta understand is like how it's gonna impact other people, how it's gonna play out for other people, and like I don't actually have to be irritable and cranky and have to apologize for things that I say later on if I'm aware of it, right?
But that's that it's like, and that's the thing I guess that really is important to shine a light on, is that for people coming out of the system, for people who have endured and survived the system of prison and police interaction and these things that as Americans especially, we're super aware of everything that's attached to that, right? But we have to be hyper aware and hyper vigilant in a way that normal everyday people don't ever even have to think about these things. And I look at that situation that I was describing, like a conflict in the workplace where, a person who's never been in prison is antagonizing a person who has been in prison. And it's like immediately if as a person who's formerly incarcerated, you react to a certain situation a certain way, but that's not how you react to situations typically. That automatically there's like the idea of finding out the truth goes out the window, right? Because people are just like, oh, that's who you are, right? That's all you know. And it's like, dude, I've proven for 10 years that that's not who I am. And there's actually this other party that's antagonizing me and I don't know how to deal with it. And I've tried. And like, so maybe we need to talk about what my experience was that got me to that, as opposed to just the fact that I had a episode where I yelled or said something disrespectful. But then the flip side of that is where we really learn a lot about it, because if I'm the one antagonizing somebody and that person flips out, nobody's going to look at that person like, why'd you react that way? They're going to look at it like, oh, of course you reacted that way because this is
why it's super important, that because like it doesn't matter how somebody that piece of it is like, we know that this cards are stacked against it. You know what I'm saying? We know that this is how people are going to see it and view it, and that's literally how that's what we're gonna get held accountable for, right? This is how we're gonna get held accountable. Like I say, no matter what your intentions are, no matter what that looks like, people will look at you and do exactly what you're saying. So it's like, we can't change how other people are gonna do what they say. They're gonna do that. You know what I mean? And like, if we cannot change our reaction to it, and it's not gonna, it's the reason part of this narrative has I feel like in my own personal responsibility is that I have reacted and I have been, I haven't. There's been situations I haven't reacted like I should. You know what I'm saying? And so it has been there, and this is why I like to take accountability around that for myself, right? Because I don't think that that narrative is ever going to change, right? What can change is that I don't have to put bullets in their gun. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's man, that's such a great point. But it's also the thing that like, when you're in it, right? When you're in that like isolation retreat mode because you're afraid to face people and face a story about you that is not true. It's like, it kind of, and it feeds this narrative and it feeds it. And so like to be able to say like, man, I will take accountability for what's mine. Sometimes it requires for people to be able to listen about what's not mine. I didn't do this and this and this and that, but I did react in a way that I wish I could change. But I want people to hear me and understand me that like I'm allowed, even as a as a person who spent 13 years in prison and as this, this like 6'5" guy with tattoos, I'm still allowed to be emotional, and I'm still allowed to experience hurt, and I'm still allowed to feel attacked at sometimes. And I always want to improve my reactions to those things. But just as much as I want to continue to heal and improve the way I react to things, I also want to feel that people hear me, right? When I can explain a situation like, listen, I shouldn't have reacted that way, but also I shouldn't be treated that way. And I think that's the part that people forget sometimes, is like, it's almost like society thinks, and individuals in society think that, oh, I can treat this person any way that I want to, and they're not allowed to react.
So I guess here's the deal for me, is that like over the last, several months, I've gotten to a place of like I'm peaceful today. I'm sitting here having this conversation with you because I got to a place, you know what I'm saying? And the place that I got to is that like a lot of, it wasn't this divorce I had. I also lost a lot of good friends of mine. That 20-year friendships have ended for me over the last few months, right? And but I had to set boundaries in my life. So the people weren't hearing me. I'm making the decision to continue to have that conversation. I'm making the decision to keep being that way. And part of that for me has been like what I learned in prison about loyalty and all the shit and all that. And I make decisions based on that old stuff, and I bring people into my life based on that old stuff. I do all that stuff, and I don't actually, I pay the price every time. And so I don't actually, if somebody's not hearing me, if I feel like somebody's not hearing me, I'm going to find people that do, because the people I have in my life today at this very moment will value me and love me and respect. There's no question in my mind about that. There is no ulterior motives. There is no nothing else. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And if it dwindles down, like I'm talking about my children and my mother. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm in a new relationship that's like super important to me. I feel respected, right? Yeah. And that's now I know through this process that's all I'm gonna accept going forward, right? That's all I'm gonna accept going forward. And that process has been super painful for me, because I had to look at it and go, I made some decisions in my life that were from a negative. I wasn't all that. They were probably the best decisions I could have made at the moment, but they weren't a healthy. I wasn't in a healthy place. Yeah. So like I start growing, and 20 years later, right? If I'm growing, I'm in a different place than I was 20 years ago, right? And now that relationship or that decision, it may not be right for me anymore, right? And that relationship may not be right for me anymore, or the relationship has to change a little bit, right?
Because it has to fit who you are today, and it has.
And the problem with that for a lot of us, especially if we're coming from the carceral system, is that like that's like foreign to cut relationships off that are loyal. Like there's the loyalty and all this we have all this misplaced tree. Like in order for us to grow as people, we got to understand that other people not everybody's meant to be with us forever. You know what I'm saying? And that's where I got caught up. Is like everybody I was always like, oh, they're gonna be. And if they stepped out of line and we grew out, then I would be hurt by that. And it's like, actually, it's okay for me to be hurt. You know what I'm saying? It's okay for me to go through this process. It's okay for people to leave. It's okay for me. You're right. You're absolutely right. Is it okay for me to be mad? But I also have to say, how long am I going to be mad?
For sure. How long is it going to?
How long am I going to be fucking mad? Like how long am I going to drink poison and hope somebody else dies? I don't want to do that anymore. Right?
How long am I going to continue to let it affect me to the point that I'm actually not continuing my positive growth, my positive.
That doesn't make sense for us, man. I spent so many years inside this fucking box that I ain't going to spend my the precious time that I have free angry at somebody because they ain't doing this, you know what I mean? All that stuff. I can't do that anymore. I need peace, man. You know what I mean?
And it's something we talked about too, and I think it's like a really important thing that people need to hear, especially, folks who are coming out of systems and like continuing to attach to that like different set of rules and loyalty and expectations is, sometimes in life you got to thin out the herd in order to strengthen the pack. Right. And if you've got these unhealthy relationships that are going on, and you've got these, like you're constantly banging your head up against something to get somebody to see that, like, no, man, I'm in a different place and I've changed. And sometimes you have to thin out that herd to recognize the people around you that actually value the growth and the change and the person that you are today. Because the longer you keep people around you that are, trying to keep you from that evolution, the harder the evolution's going to be. And to come back to what we were talking about before, one thing that I realized very clearly in my life in the last year as well is that I can spend all day wondering how many people are going to, think the negative things about me that are based in stigma and stereotype because of what I've been through in my life. But the longer I spend wondering how that story is going to grow, the less time I spend paying attention to the people that know me for who I really am. And especially for people like us, when you're in a public facing day-to-day life, when you're interacting with lots of people and you're trying to speak for and represent people who have lived through the similar situations as you, and you're trying to advocate for change and do all these things and treatment for people and all these things, is the longer I spend worrying about how many people are jumping on the negative bandwagon, the more I'm chipping away at the positive bandwagon. And the longer I spend hiding from those stories and even my issues or even my anxieties about what people are going to believe, the less time I'm interfacing to show people something different than what these people are believing. And I think that's is there a way to convince people that you just have to do it? No, it's like an internal battle that each individual has to fight. But what we hope that people hear is to really understand that when you're facing those obstacles and those circumstances, the worst thing that you can do is retreat. And the best thing that you can do is just continue to be your authentic self and continue to do the work that you're passionate about and continue to pursue the relationships that are meaningful and healthy for you. And don't worry about what you have to leave behind, because leaving it behind is the thing that's actually going to increase the strength of what's positive in your life. And I think that's something that both of us have gone through recently, right? With our personal obstacles and some of the, conflicts we've had in our personal life is I start to wonder man, this one person really believes so strongly that I am this. And I know that I'm not that. But the strength of their belief makes me wonder, am I that? And so the only healthy thing that I can do is eliminate that communication. You said it so well, is I'm choosing to have the conversation of defending myself. I know that what you're saying is not true. And I'm spending so much energy trying to convince you that it's not true without realizing that you actually already made up your mind. There's nothing I'm going to do to change your mind. And that's actually a you problem. But what I can do is look at these people over here who didn't make up their mind about some bullshit and who are actually continuing to give me the space to prove who I really am. So I got to cut this one off and channel all that negative energy into my positive interaction with these folks, because that's what's going to continue to reaffirm for me that, man, I am a good person. I am a compassionate person. I am a person who really offers a service to people in need and does something that to me feels meaningful and that other people have told me is meaningful. So you're 100% right. And I think that's really the overarching point of us having to record this episode is we choose to give energy to the negative narratives that are told about us, even though we don't have a choice about whether they're told.
Well, and I think it's really important to recognize that on an intellectual level, it's really easy to go, don't believe what they say. You know what I mean? Just stop the relationship, right? All that stuff. On an intellectual level, right? But when the unhealthy stuff is driving the bus, that's all you believe that about yourself already anyway. So you got to really ask yourself, where is this coming from? What do I believe right now? Do I believe this, or do I really believe this or not? You know what I mean? Yeah. Because I don't think we ask ourselves, especially, we coming from the system and stuff, we react so quickly and we make up our minds so quickly and we just believe what's going on right there at that very moment so quickly that we don't actually give ourselves time. It takes a while, but we don't actually give ourselves time to react appropriately to it. And then we just literally just start buying into and believing the narrative. That's why I've been so... why it's been so painful, because I believe that about myself sometimes. So I believe that, you know what I mean, from that trauma standpoint, I believe that about myself. So it's giving us being able to develop the skill and giving ourselves some time to react to things and like really ask ourselves, what is it that I believe? Because it's like sometimes it's easier said than done to go, I'm just not, you know what I mean? Like you're getting these, we're talking about family and close relationships and things like that, and it's like very, very painful stuff sometimes to get through, especially if you're dealing with substance use disorders. That might be a good, that's a huge trigger time. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like it's like a high stress situation, and it might be difficult to not. It's going to exacerbate mental health issues, so it becomes a little bit more difficult
to attach to it,
right? To not feed into it, not play into it, not believe it. Really, like when you believe it, that's when there's a problem. Is that when you believe it? That's when I personally can't. I get paralyzed with the reaction because I literally believe it in that moment. And it takes me a little while to not believe it anymore, right?
Well, it's a matter of stakes too, right? Like when the stakes are high, the higher the stakes are in how this story and this narrative is affecting you in your day-to-day life, the harder it becomes to actually do that thing that you're saying. Like when we tell people, just who cares what people say about you?
Well, because it comes down to the piece of it that we believe about it, right? Because it's hey, you remember Back to the Future?
Mm-hmm.
Remember when Marty McFly he used to argue with Biff? Remember?
Yeah,
that's who his nemesis was. They would beef all the time, right? And Marty McFly would be walking away. Biff would be talking all kinds of shit to him. He'd be walking away, right? And then Marty McFly, and then Biff would go, "What are you, chicken?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Marty McFly would stop dead in his tracks, and he would turn around, and and then it would be on. Remember when he banged on that diner?
Something in him.
Well, if you think about that, his dad was like Marty McFly's dad was like, he was always trying to fight for his dad's name. You know what I mean? The McFly name, right? Because it was the Biff name.
Yeah.
Who actually, I think that Biff, they made later on it was like they made him portray as like Donald Trump. They were trying to, but anyways, Biff, but Biff's family was like this thing over here, and then McFly was like, he was always trying to defend the name. So when he called him chicken, he would do whatever it is, and that's sometimes what happens to me, right? You see something and you believe it and you react to it, right? It's like if you told me, Jeremy, you got blonde hair, it's like, no, I don't. I look in the mirror, I don't have blonde hair, it's brown, right? But if you say, yeah, like you know what I mean. Like you're this, you're aggressive, you're controlling, you're angry, you're all these things. It's like these are the things that I've been trying to change about myself. But I've been trying to, like I know, like I've been, you know what I mean. So there's things that I still have insecurities around those issues, right? And I've been like, and it's literally what I've been trying to work on for a long time, and I want to continue to try to work on it, but I react to it and I believe it because it's true, and then I look around and they believe the narrative because it's true that I do fit these, I do check these boxes. So a lot of the things that's going, it's like, holy cow! So it's like easy to believe, right? And so it's like really really it comes down like I'm hurt and I got to change this belief in this moment, right? And that's hard for us coming out of the system because we wore it. It's been an identity to us. It's been this whole thing about like, oh, you know what I mean? It's been,
and it's not something you can shed. It's not something that you don't actually ever get to make the choice of, I'm going to leave this narrative behind and everybody's going to follow, right? You don't get to make that choice. The fact of the matter is, and it doesn't even matter, we're talking about just people in general, that the narratives that follow you, they follow you. It doesn't matter what you do, they can still creep up. And I think, after hearing, everything that we've talked about today in this episode, coming back from a little break and coming back from a hiatus, hopefully the thing that people really hear in this is that, like, the only thing that you can really recognize is that you have basically two choices. And one choice is that you feed into fighting the negative story.
Sink or swim, baby. You know what I'm saying?
And it's like the longer you feed into it, the more energy you're taking from finding people who affirm the truth about you versus the story about you. And hopefully anybody who's listening in can really take that away, because we all will run into this situation in our life. And if you're somebody who's impacted by our carceral systems, it's guaranteed that you're going to run into it repeatedly throughout your life. And so hopefully the thing that you can take away is, and it's not going to happen in the moment. It's not always going to happen right away, but you got to get to a point where at some point you realize that the longer I keep fighting the negative story about me that I know is untrue, the more effort I'm taking away from being around people who affirm the truth about me and the work it takes to continue to grow into my truth. And so hopefully if you're listening, that resonates with you and that means something to you. And hopefully if you're listening, you come back and you listen, because we're back to recording, and we're going to be putting out episodes every 2 weeks and content every week. And it's good to be back, and it's good to do this and to be next to this giant prison door that has really become something that people, attach meaning to. And, thank you to all our listeners, and download, subscribe, follow, pay attention. Let us know if something you heard today resonates with you. And always for you, Jeremy, man, I appreciate the vulnerability and being able to talk about some of the things you're going through, because that's the only way that we can continue to really build with people, is for them to know that they're not alone. We're going through those things too, man. So thank you as always.